with this big grin because she's like, oh my goodness, you got this. Just want, and this is all captured live, Corinne. So I want you to know, it's like watching a proud mom. She is so excited that you can do this.
Hello.
Good evening, everybody. At 6:07 p.m., this meeting of the Mountain View WSMA School Board will be called to order. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. We will now take roll of all the trustees. Laura Blakely,
Bill Lambert.
Devin Conley, Laura Berman. Let the record reflect that all trustees are present. We'll move on to approval of the agenda. Are there any trustee questions or comments regarding the agenda itself? We'll move on to public comment. If you're a member of the public and wish to make a comment on the agenda itself, you may raise your hand in Zoom. We have one hand raised. We're putting the timer up. Just one moment. Okay, see, it actually appears that we don't have any public comment. Is there a motion to approve the agenda? So moved.
A second.
All those in favor? Aye. Aye. On a motion made by trustee Blakely and seconded by trustee Lambert, the agenda has been approved unanimously. We will move on to item 2, special recognition for the Turtle Award. Dr. Rudolph?
Yep. So just as we did last month, at the beginning of the month, we will always recognize individuals, or we're asking the board to approve the recognition that other individuals have sent in to recognize employees who have went above and beyond or who've been exceptionally helpful or supporting another employee. That's just a great way of doing some recognition. So I present to you this this round of Turtle Award winners. All right, and the employees receiving recognition for the Golden Turtle Awards are at Castro School. Now, I apologize if I mispronounce someone's name. Elizabeth Yamas, Miguel Mesa. At the district office, we have Marcel Stively. From Vargas School, we have Hedva Jitba, Jennifer Dux, and Principal Taylor.
Right, well, this is an action item, but first I want to see if there are any trustee questions, comments before I move on to public comments. Nope, seeing as there are none, are there any members of the public who wish to make a comment on our Turtle Award employees for this month? Okay, seeing as there are none, trustees, this is an action item. Do I have a motion?
So moved. It doesn't have an action written in the agenda, so we should move to approve the turtle honorees that Dr. Rudolph just referenced.
All those in favor? Aye. Okay, so the Turtle Award nominees have been approved unanimously. We'll move on to the item 3, closed session agenda for public comments. This is a time reserved for members of the public wishing to address the board concerning items on the closed session agenda. If you'd like to make a comment on the closed session agenda, you may raise your hand in Zoom. Okay. Seeing as there are none, at 6:11 p.m., we will adjourn to the closed session. at 8:05 PM, we now, the open session of this meeting is reconvened. There was no action taken in closed session. We are moving on to item 6, the consent agenda. All items on the consent agenda are considered routine and will be approved in one motion. Are there any questions or comments from trustees regarding the consent agenda? Seeing as there are none, I will move on to public comment. If you are joining us on Zoom, you may raise your hand in Zoom, and I'm going to take a few extra seconds to check our Zoom hands, because I know now that there's a delay, and I want to make sure not to miss anybody. Okay, we have one hand. Phone number ending in 76. We're putting the timer up, and you have 3 minutes for your public comments on items on the consent agenda. You may unmute yourself when you're ready.
Good evening. I've had trouble trying to raise my hand at the proper time because of how quickly you've gone through the waiting for public comment. I did want to have one comment on reporting out. Is that okay?
Yes.
I'm, quote, retired trustee Stephen Nelson, unquote, and similar to, quote, former trustee Ellen Wheeler, unquote, I would prefer that your minutes reflect that honorific title. I'm only speaking on closed session item B. Please note that in the minutes on action and waiting. I hope the majority of the board have had a chance to further reflect on what the city council voted on. Their vote was 6-0. Their vote was not to meet with the negotiators, Rudolph, Westover, and Henderson. It seems only one trustee listened well and listened deeply. Some might call our council childish, but I think more of the community don't want you, who run public education, to now run a separate public parks and recreation. Please don't waste much more of your time. Please just wait patiently. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Okay, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Great. On a motion made by Vice President Conley and seconded by Trustee Blakely. Oh, all those in favor? Aye. Aye. Skipped a step. On a motion made by Vice President Conley, seconded by Trustee Blakely, the consent agenda has been approved unanimously. We'll move on to communications. If you are a member of the employee organizations, you may raise your hand in Zoom if you'd like to present to the board at this time. Okay, if you are part of a district committee, are there any representatives of district committees that would like to address the board at this time? Then we'll move on to our superintendent comments. Dr. Rudolph?
Yep. Thank you, President Berman. So just want to give a couple of quick updates. Just a reminder that we will have our monthly community check-in tomorrow on Zoom. So looking forward to that. We will be talking about Safety Month. So we have an upcoming earthquake drill that we'll be talking about, but we also have been working on updating a lot of security protocols and safety. In fact, I'll be touching base on this in a little while, but we are coming closer and closer to activating all of our access cards, our key cards. So the first 2 schools will come online, and we'll be doing this on a rolling basis as the systems are being brought up. Will be Stevenson and Therakov, and then we'll keep going from there. And I would even say, thank you to this Mountain View City staffs, agreeing to upgrade the locks at the both sports pavilions so that they also will be on. The beauty of these systems is that, as we talked about with principals, it gives the school district as well as the principal the ability to lock down all doors. It will be a change in practice, and so we expect there to be some hiccups, which is why it's great that we're rolling them out. And I do want to thank our tech team who is working on them. In fact, we were made aware of an issue today at one of our doors, and I called Mr. Aker, and should have already fixed both of those doors for you. So it's real good that it happens. On a side note, I just want to point out that we did have an incident today where there was an active shooter who was coming from a different city. And so I don't want to go into all the details of it, but I do want to thank MVPD, both Katie, Chief Mike, Officer Tilo, Officer Gamble for their quick response, as well as all the other officers that were there. And I also want to commend our staff, both at Crittenden, as well as at Theracov and at Stevenson. All of them responded quickly whenever we needed to get on the phone with them. At one point, even Ms. Flores Akey, who's in Yosemite, was on the phone call so that all of us were on the same page. But we've been upgrading our security protocols. In fact, just this week, we had just talked about, the difference between a lockdown, a shelter in place, right? And so we wanted to make sure that everybody understood, and we were able to execute that. So that's a real good thing. Doesn't mean that there weren't a couple hiccups, which I'm sure will come up a little bit later when we talk. But I do want to commend all of them for being able to respond so quickly to what could have been a potential issue that has started in another city and continued into Mountain View. Now, the last thing, and I want to make sure I get this right, so I just want to recognize Ms. Pullman on our behalf. Actually went down to the Santa Clara Office of Education, and Santa Clara County actually recognized us. And the reason why I'm on my phone is so I can read this right, because I haven't seen the certificate. But they honored MVWSD in recognition for the board's unwavering dedication to the LGBTQ inclusivity in education. Your outstanding efforts have illuminated a path of acceptance and equality for all students, inspiring and fostering a culture of acceptance and inclusion. And then your commitment to the LGBTQ equity has enriched the educational landscape and positively impacted the countless lives. And that also came with a California Legislature Assemblyman Certificate of Recognition from Mark Berman. So just wanted to commend the board for their approach, and want to thank Ms. Pullman for going down to the county office to accept that. And that's all that I have for today.
Thank you, Dr. Rudolph. Okay, so we will move on to item 8, which is community comments. This is a time reserved for community members to address the board on items that are not on the agenda. The board and the administration welcome this time to listen. However, in compliance with the Brown Act, the board is not permitted to take action on non-agendized items. Are there members of the public that wish to address the board on items not on the agenda today? You may raise your hand in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. Seeing as there are none, we'll move on to review and action. Item A is planning for a parcel tax renewal. Parcel tax renewal.
Good evening, trustees. We have Jeremy Hauser here who's available to present to talk about what it would look like to plan to possibly renew our parcel tax. In front of you, trustees also have an updated presentation.
Thank you all for having me tonight. Would you like me to share my screen and my presentation? Would that be easiest?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Great. Give me 1 second here. Can everybody see this?
Yes.
Great. All right. Well, thank you all for having me this evening. My name is Jeremy Hauser. I'm a founding partner with Team Civics. We are a strategy and communications consulting firm that specializes specifically in working with public agencies on public finance ballot measures. And me and my business partners have actually had the pleasure of working right here in the Mountain View Wispin School District on many successful measures in the past, and are looking forward to working with you all again as you consider a renewal of your parcel tax measure. Just to give you a sense of the type of services that we provide, first and foremost, we help you assess the feasibility of a parcel tax measure. We help you determine the best election timing, the right tax rate, the right tax structure, and the various program funding priorities that would be built into a revenue measure. We will help you develop the measure itself and ensure it qualifies for the ballot of our choice. And we'll help you embark on a public education effort to tell your story to the community regarding your funding needs and how a parcel tax addresses those needs. So talking specifically about your measure, Measure B, just a little bit of background. We last renewed Measure B in May of 2017 in a special election. We were happy to receive 72% support from voters, which was over the requisite 2/3 threshold needed for approval. Funds from Measure B have been instrumental in helping to provide academic support at each of your elementary schools for English language learners, helping students that have difficulty with the basics like reading, writing, or math, supporting programs focused on 21st century skills, maintaining up-to-date textbooks and instructional materials, and ensuring that you all can attract and retain the best teachers possible in your district. Measure B includes a Citizens Oversight Committee as well as annual public audits so that voters can be sure that funds are being spent as promised. You also offer exemptions for seniors in your community as well as individuals who receive SSI or SSDI. And most importantly for our conversation tonight, Measure B is set to expire in July of 2025. Now, parcel taxes offer you a great deal of flexibility. Unlike a bond measure, which you must go to the ballot during a regularly scheduled election, you can really pursue a parcel tax or a parcel tax renewal during any election that's available to you. And at the time that you pursue a renewal, you can really alter the various components of your measure. That means you can change the rate, you can change the duration, and you can actually change the tax structure itself when you're renewing your measure. And I think that point is particularly important given recent news coming out of Alameda Unified School District. They recently won an appeals court decision, which is basically stated that a parcel tax with a square footage rate that includes a cap on the total amount that any one parcel can pay is now considered to be a legally viable option. In the past, your district has considered pursuing this tax structure, although at the time we were considering pursuing it, the legal case was on the opposite side of this, and thus it didn't really seem like a legally viable path forward. Now it does because of this recent court ruling related to Alameda Unified School District. Now, when we're looking specifically at Measure B, I did mention that there are a lot of different election dates available to you. And so I've listed here on this slide every possible election we could pursue a renewal from now until it expires in July of 25. For ease of reading, I've bolded the most common and frankly recommended elections to pursue a parcel tax renewal, and I've listed them sequentially. So our first option would be the March 5th primary next year, although you will see that the deadline to qualify for that ballot is coming up. It's December 8th of this year. So if we were to pursue that election date, it would be a very quick turnaround. Not saying it's impossible, but certainly something to be cognizant of as we're moving forward. You also, like you did with Measure B, have the option of pursuing a special mail ballot only election. There would be one conducted on May 7th of next year. And you see here the deadline to qualify for that would be February 9th. And then finally, in 2024, we have the November 5th presidential general election. That will be the high watermark for voter turnout in the 4-year election cycle. The deadline to qualify for that ballot is August of next year. You do technically also have 2 elections available to you in 2025 if you are feeling particularly risky and wanting to hold a renewal to the 11th hour. Those options would be March 4th, which would be what's called a regular special election, meaning that there would be both mail ballots and vote centers open. And then our last possible date would be May 6th, that another mail ballot special election. And you'll see the deadlines for those elections are in late 24 and early 25. So how do we get from where we are tonight to a successful renewal of your parcel tax? We've developed over years of successful bond and parcel tax efforts, a pretty tried and true 4-step approach that takes us from inception to success on election night. And I'm going to dive into these 4 steps into greater detail, but just to kind of give you a roadmap of what we're looking at. The first step is always a feasibility study to understand what is possible, when it is possible, and at what tax rate it is possible. Once we have the answers and the scientific research back from a feasibility study, we move into awareness building to help you as a district begin to tell your story in the community and introduce the need to renew your parcel tax. And then finally, we actually work on developing the measure itself to ensure that it's written in clear and understandable language and that you qualify for the ballot that we decide to pursue. And then I include on here a 4th step, which is in a different color for a reason. It's the independent campaign. If you all have been around bond or parcel tax campaigns before, you'll know that school districts are prohibited from advocating for the passage of a measure or using any public resources to do so. So once the board does act to place a measure on the ballot, there's a bit of a passing of the baton that happens, and there needs to be an independent group who takes that baton and gets the measure over the finish line. So hopping into the specifics of each phase. Phase 1, which is really what we're seeking direction on tonight, is the feasibility study, right? And our goal in this phase is to answer the key strategic questions that we're going to need to know in order to put your parcel tax renewal on the path to success. So at a very basic level, we're going to want to know, does a renewal stand a reasonable chance of achieving that 2/3 voter approval threshold? We also are going to find out what tax rates fit within the tolerances of your community. We can see if a cost of living adjustment might be possible and what sort of sunset is feasible within your community. And then again, given the Alameda Unified School District ruling, we can test to see if a square footage rate is possible. A poll will also allow us to ask your voters what programs are the top priorities for them. It'll help us get a good understanding of any controversies that exist in the community and how they impact support for a measure. We'll get to see if your community knows about your parcel tax and understands specifically what the funds are used to support. And as I mentioned previously, we'll get a really good scientific read on when is the right time to go to the ballot and how projected voter turnout on those different elections impact our chances of success. And then, of course, we can also find out if there's any other competing measures or issues on the horizon that we should know about and how the overall economy and political environment might impact our support. Now, after the feasibility study, assuming we get polling back that tells us parcel tax renewal is feasible, we move into phase 2, our awareness building phase, where really our goal is making sure that both parents and non-parent voters in your community understand what's at stake with your parcel tax and understand how it helps address the funding needs in your schools. We'll help you develop informational messaging and a plan to get that message out to key groups. We'll write talking points, frequently asked questions, PowerPoint presentations, and online content to help you get that message out. We'll utilize all of the communication channels that are available to us to deliver that message, including direct mail, social media, and online advertising. And we'll develop a plan to help you inform both your internal stakeholder groups, think your teachers, parents, staff, and principals, and also your external stakeholder groups like elected leaders, business groups, and ethnic and faith community leaders to make sure that they have heard from you before you act as a board to place a measure on the ballot. And then finally, after our awareness building effort, we move into phase 3, which is the actual development of the measure itself. And the goal here is pretty simple. It's to build a parcel tax measure that gives you the highest likelihood of success. So during this phase, we will recommend to you a final tax rate, tax structure, whether or not to include any annual adjustments, how to structure your accountability mechanisms, and what sort of sunset might be feasible. Will help ensure that all program descriptions and all ballot materials are written in as clear and concise of language as possible so that your voters can digest them. We'll work with your legal counsel to make sure that we get every single word right in that 75-word ballot question that every single voter we know for a fact will read when they are filling out their ballot. And then we'll present all of this to you as a board and make sure that you qualify for the election that we choose on time and accurately. And then finally, the final phase in this process, again, provided tonight just for your information, is the independent campaign, which cannot use any district resources whatsoever. It's really the critical final step to get over that 2/3 threshold needed for support. Again, an independent campaign will need to be formed to do the fundraising, grassroots organizing, and endorsement gathering needed for a successful parcel tax renewal. And with that, I am happy to answer any questions that you all might have.
Great. Thank you so much for the presentation. Trustees, any clarifying questions? In particular around phase 1, which is what we're looking to make a motion on for today. Trustee Lambert.
Yes, in the best of all possible worlds, I would imagine it would be good to coordinate bond measures and parcel tax measures with other entities or organizations within a city, such as city going out for bonds and or revenue measures, in the same calendar year. Does that actually happen? Or do you recommend it, or is there a mechanism whereby, something like that could be discussed?
I would certainly recommend coordination with your partner agencies. And I think that's really part of the awareness building phase, is really a give and take and back and forth with all of the key stakeholders in your community, which do include other government agencies and the elected officials who represent those agencies. So I would really recommend that dialogue remain open from now until the day we're on the ballot, because I do think it's a really important process. That being said, November of next year in particular is going to be a very crowded ballot. I just don't envision a scenario where we're on the ballot in November and we're not also on the ballot with other agencies throughout Santa Clara County.
Are those discussions something you can help facilitate?
We can absolutely help facilitate those discussions. Obviously, they're more effective coming from boots on the ground than a paid consultant, but we're happy to help facilitate and usher those conversations forward.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Blakely.
Thank you for the presentation. Good to see you again. I had 2 questions. One was the new Alameda County case that allows a per square footage rate versus just a per parcel rate. The very first parcel tax that this district tried to pass, gosh, I want to say it was like in 04 or something. I think it had like a tiered rate, and it didn't pass in part because of that. Large landowners didn't like the fact that they would be paying more. I'm just wondering these days, is it possible under the new guidance to do one where like there's the basic one, and then if it's over a certain amount of square feet, there's a stepped up one, and then above a certain amount, beyond that, there's a third tier? Or is that
So
permissible?
well, it's great to see you as well, Trustee Blakely. But to answer your question, no, tiered rate structures are still not permissible under the law because they create different classifications of taxpayers. But to me, the key part of the ruling in Alameda that puts this option back on the table for you all as a district is the fact that we can add a cap on the rate that any one parcel would pay, right? So the reason past square footage measures were not feasible in your district was because there were some very large property owners who, without a cap on the rate, were going to be paying very significant amounts in taxes, right? This new ruling allows us to put a cap on it so that everyone is paying the same rate, but any one parcel wouldn't pay over a certain dollar amount per year.
Good to know. Thank you. My other question had to do with, you listed out these different elections. And I thought the special elections had a higher cost that we have to bear for the ballot because it's like, say there's just 2 measures on a special ballot, then you have to pay half the costs. And so it's cheaper to select one of the general elections that's not a special election. Is that accurate?
That is 100% accurate. November would be the cheapest because you'd be sharing the cost with the most amount of jurisdictions. It also will be a longer ballot, so there'll be more printing costs associated with that, but you will be sharing those costs with every other jurisdiction on the ballot. March, similar case, although it will be a slightly shorter ballot and less jurisdictions. You are correct that when you call an election on your own, a standalone election, you really do bear the entire cost of that election. And even if there is another measure occurring on the same ballot, if that measure is not occurring in a district that overlaps with yours, you're still going to pay the entire balloting costs for the ballots in your community, right? So it's really about the overlap and who you're sharing those costs with.
Okay, and so when it comes time to selecting which election, assuming we want to move forward with the replacement parcel tax, selecting which election, you'll provide us with some of the estimates of what the range could be and what the cost would be. So we can know going in.
I would be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Trustee Chang.
Thank you. I had a question about the Alameda's, their parcel tax, that Measure B parcel tax that have that $8,000 cap on their formula. And do you know in Alameda if was using the square footage parcel tax, if did many residents see their parcel tax stay about the same? Did many see themselves go down? Like, as in, like, are you aware of the communities that have done that? I recognize maybe we're very different from Alameda, in our composition of our residents and businesses, but they're like, how did it shake out in the end in Alameda?
So the sequencing was a little bit different in Alameda because they've had a square footage tax for quite a while. But the math is the same in that in order to maintain the current revenue that they bring in from their square footage parcel tax, if they were to switch to a flat rate, they would see more than half of their homeowners would see a significant increase in their tax burden because they'd be switching from a square footage rate to a flat tax rate. So the sequencing is a little bit different, but I think the answer is the same in that the square footage tax allows them to bring in less revenue from their smaller single family homeowners and more from larger commercial properties.
Is it likely that a square footage tax system would mean that if we were pursuing about the same amount as our existing parcel tax, that many people would see their parcel tax go down?
You know, I don't want to precede the data, and diving into that data would be really, step one of the feasibility process. I can take an educated guess and say, knowing the demographic makeup of your tax base, I would think it would be pretty feasible that we could construct a tax measure that would see a reduced rate for some homeowners. Can't promise it would be for everyone or even a majority, but I just think given the amount of large commercial real estate and properties you have in your district, a square footage based rate could help, spread that burden more equitably across your various property types.
Vice President Conley.
Thank you. So I'm assuming that in this feasibility study, this will involve sending out a survey. And I'm curious about, previously we've had a third-party survey on behalf of the district on other issues before, and there was one round of surveys that community members shared with me afterwards, and it looked like a phishing scam to them. And it, kind of the presentation of it and the formatting seemed very suspicious. And so a lot of people were like, oh, wait, that was about the district? I was supposed to fill that out? Oh, goodness, I didn't know that. I trashed it. So I'm curious if the board will see the survey before it goes out. Not that we want to tinker with it, but that we'll be aware of what it looks like and the formatting and things like that.
Yeah, happy to answer that question. I'll say first, trust is really important in the polling process, which is why we've partnered with FM3 Research, who really are the gold standard of pollsters in California and have done a ton of work with all of your neighbors and throughout the Bay Area. And in terms of drafting the questionnaire itself, we would be happy to collaborate with you all as a district in that process. I would recommend a board subcommittee of 2 board members, because we found that if we bring a questionnaire to a board meeting before it is live, we can actually bias the results by making the questions public before they go live. And we're not saying that because we want to hide the 8 ball. We're saying that because we want to give you the absolute best scientific read possible. And so we really want to keep those questions private until they become public, right? So that we get a really honest read and assessment of what voters are thinking about your schools and your parcel tax. So the short answer is yes, we want to be incredibly collaborative with you all in the drafting of that to ensure that we are phrasing the questions in ways that make sense to you and resonate in your community, and gives you the best data possible to answer the key questions that we want to answer.
Thank you. That was very helpful in understanding a process to do that. And then my other question, when Trustee Lambert talked a little bit about when other agencies are going out for taxes at the same time or other measures. Our city council was recently talking about, they had a study session on introducing some tax measures in the November 3rd election during 2024. When you have seen multiple agencies within a community go out at the same time, what have you seen the impacts on school districts be in their success in that type of situation?
Well, first I'll say that we have been successful in many presidential election cycles where there are a laundry list of measures on the ballot. And because what we usually find is that the few points in support you might lose from voter fatigue, because there are so many taxes on the ballot, you gain back in the demographics of the people who are turning out to vote, right? In a high turnout presidential election, you're getting your younger, more progressive voters who really only turn out every 4 years and are favorable to taxes. I would also say that in the pecking order of voter priorities for their tax dollars, schools constantly rise to the top of the list. And so, we've seen that school measures in particular do well when on a crowded ballot.
Thank you.
Okay, one last question maybe. So can you just tell us a little bit about the timeline for the phase 1? So about how long would it take to create the survey? Sounds like you could bring it back and share that with a couple of trustees. And then what's the turnaround time for when that would go out to the public?
Yeah, so we would love to get started tomorrow on the drafting so that we can, keep a slim hope for March available. I think realistically, we would want to, have the next 2 to 3 weeks to draft and finalize that survey, with the hopes of getting it into the field in late October and early November. Data collection and processing usually takes, anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks. It really just depends on, how quickly the interviews go, if people are in or out of town. So we'd want to avoid the Thanksgiving holiday. And then we'd hope to bring, I think, results back to you as a board in November, so that we can, make some decisions about next steps and kind of dive into the data and give you all some recommendations about what we're seeing.
Wonderful. Thank you. I think I have one more question, Trustee Chang.
Thank you. Our current parcel tax that was passed in May 2017, which would be like an election that would be, if we didn't pass it, we'd still have at least one more final chance. Like, do we have kind of like, as in, do we have like a date that's like you would say is like for the ones you'd recommend, as in like here are the.
Yep.
I mean, I know there's all these small elections, but like I just like in your mind, is there like a point where it's like this is the safe point to do it because you have another really good chance? I guess what I'm trying to say within these list of election dates.
Yeah, so I would say, truthfully, November of next year is probably as far as we would want to take it, because, God forbid we weren't successful in November, we still would have that March or May special election available to us in 2025. So to me, that kind of seems like the obvious choice. But we really want the data to help drive that decision, and we want to get a better understanding of how voter turnout affects our chances of success.
Well, thank you very much. We're going to move on to public comments. If you are a member of the public and you would like to comment on this item, you can raise your hand on Zoom or press *9 on your phone. Seeing as there are none, I'll turn it back to trustees. Trustees, any final comment? Oh, thank you. Yeah. One hand up. Phone number 76, Mr. Nelson. We're going to put the timer out for 3 minutes. And you may unmute yourself and start when you're ready.
Thank you. I still haven't gotten this thing of, I had to hand up for like 2 minutes before, and it didn't keep my hand up. I'm, quote, retired trustee Stephen Nelson, unquote. At page 4 of the contractor presentation, Freeman versus Alameda was filed for publication August 3rd in the First District Court of Appeals. It gives the per square feet tax increased clarity. DWK brilliantly won against a brilliant law firm. And if you find and read the opinion on Google Scholar, you'll get that joke. I think the care of this contractor shows in this revised presentation. What it means is they seem to better understand per square foot fair taxes. So I have no complaint at all. I've mailed you a much more extensive comment earlier this week before the revised presentation, and I'll update that written comment to you later. Thank you.
Thank you. Then I'll turn it over to trustees for final comments, or if there's a motion. Trustee Chang.
Thank you. I would interested in, as they're investigating the dates of them looking into more detail, March 5th, that's also the California Republican primary. California is the largest amount of Republican delegates in a presidential race. I just want to be aware of the, that's what it is. Also, just as we're polling, parcel taxes work really well when we can, the board's all behind it. And I just want to be forthcoming that it would really matter to me that while we can poll to find out what voters want, what the language of our ballot is what we are going to do. And what I mean by that is I still feel hurt. I still feel disappointed that that our bond language said that we'd spend on science classrooms and we didn't spend $1 on that. And our Measure B in 2017 said we spend it on science education, and we didn't spend on that. The parcel tax is not spent on science education. And so I just think that say on the Measure B when it says science and computer science and engineering, we're going to say that, let's do it. And we did do, I'm on the parcel tax committee, and we did a lot of good things that we couldn't foresee in 2017. $400,000 of Measure B was spent on counselors and mental health support. Definitely, I think voters would be behind that. So there's things we did spend that we wouldn't foresee, but I just, I want us to, I aspire for us to have ballot language. It's not that polls well, but is inspiring on what great things we're going to do with the money for future kids.
Trustee Lambert.
Real quick, how much does the Measure B parcel tax bring in to the district?
Approximately $2.8 million.
Sweet, thank you. I move that the Board of Trustees approve the contract with Team Civics as presented.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Wonderful. So on a motion made by Trustee Lambert, seconded by Trustee Blakely, let's see, the contract with Team Civics to start exploring the feasibility of renewing the parcel tax is approved unanimously. Thank you so much for the presentation today. We look forward to working with you.
Me as well. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Okay, then we're going to move on to review and discussion. Our first item is update to Measure T summer work.
Good evening, trustees. So this evening, I'll be updating you on our summer construction. I'm going to go through these first few slides pretty quickly because the board has seen them before. So all of our work is grounded in our strategic plan to make sure that we ensure that facilities and resources equitably serve all of our students. And it's guided by our master facility plan, which was a 10-year master facility plan that the board actually approved prior to the passing of Measure T. Measure T was passed on March 3rd, 2020, and it could be spent on a variety of different pieces. Bond language is limited to 75 words and is broadly written to incorporate any projects that may be needed in the course of the bond program. Having the master facility bond passed ahead of time, the master facility plan passed ahead of time was actually incredibly beneficial to the district. None of us at the time could have envisioned that we would be going into a period with unprecedented escalation. So per Engineering News Record, or ENR, we experienced, so in 2020, 5.28%, 2021, 13.46%, in 2022, 18.39%, and in 2023 for year to date, 15% escalation, and we're projected to have 5% escalation in 2024. What this means is by having a plan of how we were going to spend bond funds helped us get out the door so we could start our projects as quickly as possible. So if we had started, right now we have $123 million worth of projects completed or currently under contract. If we had waited a year to start those projects, we would have lost approximately $16 million. If we had waited 2 years to start our projects, we would have lost approximately $24 million. So having that master facility plan in place before the passing of Measure T allowed us to move quickly on all of our projects. So looking at our Measure T projects by site over the summer, I'm going to go over this chart and then I'll skip forward to show you the pictures of some of the things that we've been able to accomplish. So of course, we have our access control project where we have approximately 90% of all of the door hardware at all of the school sites, and the exterior gate modifications will be taking place this fall, or actually it's currently underway. We also had our window replacement project. You can see that different window work was done at different sites across the district. Next year, we'll also take on the next phase of the window replacement project. For our phase 3 of HVAC, this is the libraries and special ed classrooms at Bub, Emai, and Landals. They are scheduled to be installed after hours. We also installed vape detections at our middle schools at Crittenden and Graham. So now the staff are getting text alerts when there is an issue in the restrooms. We did exterior painting at Graham. Next summer, we'll be doing the exterior painting at Crittenden. This was in conjunction with our window project because, of course, when we pull out the windows, we have to touch up the paint, and Graham was in need of painting. We also added storage buildings at Stevenson and Vargas. And then we added office public address speakers. So initially, when we did our first round of updating our public address system, we did not have the speakers in the offices because it was at the time too loud. But over time, after experiencing and making sure, we wanted to make sure for safety that all the offices could hear the announcements. So the next slides go into a little bit more detail about what occurred at each school site. I'm going to skip through these because the chart had each item called out, and to be able to show you some of the photos of what took place over the summer. Sorry, in the chart was not our employee housing project. Right now, they're finished with window installation, exterior stucco. So if you drive by 777 Middlefield, it's really starting to look like an apartment complex. Site work will begin once scaffolding for the exterior work is removed. So looking at the photos, this is our access control project. For our access control project, we will be rolling it out site by site. So first up, as Dr. Rudolph mentioned, is Stevenson and Therakoff. So we'll pass out access cards to all staff members and then gradually take keys back. This is looking at the Graham exterior painting, the storage buildings at Stevenson and Vargas, vape detection at Crittenden and Graham, and the Vargas MPR roll-up door, window replacement, and then our staff housing project. We also wanted to give an update on the Vargas planting. So Vargas planting is broken up into 2 phases. The first phase is planting trees, because we very clearly heard the board say we wanted to get trees and get Vargas greener as quickly as possible. This is looking at the schematic design for the canopy and tree counts. This is looking at the design board that was shared when Carducci initially did their presentation. So the scope of work, just to remind the public, includes new trees, shrubs, and vines in existing planting areas at Vargas. We initially put the project out to bid in June 2023 ahead of planned construction in July and August. The cost came back much higher due to the summer construction market. So we put it out to bid again. So the 2 bids that we received, the lowest was $100,000 above the board approved budget. This was mainly because contractors were booked for the summer, resulting in a higher bid pricing, and the design architect Carducci and Associates worked with Greystone West to repackage this project and put it out for bid. And the project was actually awarded tonight within budget under the consent agenda. So currently construction is now planned for late fall of 2023, which actually better aligns with the planting season, especially because many of the trees called out in the plan are actually very mature. So planting in the late fall season allows the trees to develop a stronger root system. Looking at our upcoming projects, we have HVAC upgrades or phase 3. This includes replacement of HVAC units at the library and special ed buildings at Bub, Imai, and Landals. We have Therakoff electrical upgrade, the park restroom project, the window replacement for phase 2 for replacing existing windows at the schools that were not tackled this summer, exterior painting at Crittenden, and we have HVAC phase 4 and 5. So this is bringing on smaller units that were around the district, and then also getting all of our systems onto Johnson Controls. We have the Landals paving project, the Vargas planting project phase 1, and then the Vargas planting project phase 2. Are there any questions?
Thank you very much. Trustees, questions? Yes, Vice President Conley.
Yes, thank you for the presentation and for the quick rollout of so many of these projects. Interestingly, we had a shelter in place today at 3 of our schools. And while we have fences and the fences have gates, my understanding is that our locks are not yet installed on the fencing. Can you give us an update on when the perimeter controls, not the buildings themselves, but the perimeter controls will be in place and active?
Yes, so currently probably about 10 to 12 weeks out for the perimeter control. This is mainly because all the gates must be removed and altered in order to accept the new electronic locks. We have a couple of different options if the board wants to direct us to try to move forward more quickly. If we want to speed up the process by about 2 weeks, we can pay overtime for when the welders remove the gates. So if we pay overtime, we can speed the process up by about 2 weeks, which would be $150,000. We can also pay our custodians 2 hours extra a day if they're willing to manually lock and unlock the gates. The one concern that had been brought up in the past with having our custodians manually lock and unlock the gates is there will probably be times for human error where a gate is accidentally left locked, either after hours or over the weekend. But there are a couple of different options if we wanted to secure the perimeter of the campus more quickly.
Thank you. I think, I started hearing from parents at Stevenson, for example, that parents were coming onto campus through one of the field gates that doesn't lock during the shelter in place. And they were really concerned about it. And I had to take a deep breath and remind myself that for all of the years until now, there was no fencing or gates whatsoever, and shelter in place meant literally just lock your classroom door. That being said, I don't know if the answer is to speed up the installation of the locks by 2 weeks for such a high cost, or to have it manually locked, or, having an actual plan in place for what we do if this happens again before the locks are in place. Do we do anything to address the gates and making sure people don't come in there? And that might be a question for Dr. Rudolph or for our safety task force.
Dr. Rudolph?
I wasn't sure if Dr. Westover was going to respond or not. Is she- So I was
Sorry.
waiting for her for her to go. Do you want to go first or?
Any option is possible. I'm sure we can discuss it during the safety task force meeting.
So we can, I think one of the options is definitely changing the core. I think it will be effective up to a certain point. There will be some hiccups in terms of whether or not the gate is left unlocked or inadvertently. I think the 10 to 12 weeks are reducing it to 8 to 10 weeks. That's district wide. So, I mean, it will move faster depending on how many gates are at a particular campus or where they currently are. I would say you probably just need to do a combination of both of those. But we definitely can take it into account. We, obviously our shelter in place worked today, but, I'll just use the middle schools. One of the things we want to do is delay their lockdown drill that they do with MVPD because we wanted the access control to be active so that we practiced, a lockdown with MVPD at the actual site and could be able to lock all the doors. But I think there's a lot of ways that we can definitely sort of address it. The one concern I did have earlier today, which I expressed at least to Ms. Lambert, was that we sort of asked the staff member to go over there and redirect people, and it was before we got the all clear. And so, at that point, all of us were sheltering in place, and then we found out that there was a staff member out there, and I was like, well, we're sort of putting someone at risk, right? And so, I think whatever option that we choose or that the board is comfortable with, it needs to take into account that we don't put someone at risk. So I'm fine with us starting one for a changing of the cores for the places that have it. There are pros and cons to it, but whichever, I think, this is one of those things about, how quickly do we want this to take place? It will, even on this campus, when I take a walk at lunch, you still see people entering onto the field. I saw someone today just in the heat sitting on the bench, right? And so I think that we'll have to deal with some of those items, but we're open to doing any of them because obviously today it made it real. And we want to make sure that we can keep everyone safe.
Yeah, I'm not prescriptive about the response, but more, that's why if the security task force wants to talk about it, or the safety task force wants to talk about it and come up with the best, until we are at the point where we can have those gates locked, what is our stopgap solution in a case of an emergency like this? And how do we communicate that to parents? I think part of what was concerning for parents today was the last they had seen, at least from the district, we had sent out a flyer saying that the gates would be locked during the school day starting in August, and we would put up signs and notify them, and that took place. But now it's October and we haven't actually done that yet. And so, how do we do the best that we can in the meantime while we're sifting through the construction issues?
So I have a bi-weekly meeting scheduled internally with staff, or we've been taking the recommendations from the safety committee and then working internally to execute those and still partnering with JOF. We can definitely bring it to them and ask and get their take on it and come up. And then, it has Director Perone has different administrators on it. So I think we can come up with a stopgap solution, and then work on communicating it out.
And then, down the line, even when they lock automatically, will we conduct regular checks on them? Like, it- things to consider around that to make sure it's not propped open, it's, whatever.
Yeah, that's something that we've been discussing. One of the things we've realized as we've entered into this world is, anytime we leave a gate unlocked, it actually drains the battery faster.
Hmm.
And the same is true with our doors, right? So we've been talking about, okay, so what is a regular cadence? Is there a way that we can monitor the battery life, and how do we make sure that doors are closing, and sort of what that looks like? And I know Dr. Westover has been putting return, sort of working on how to fix the gate so that they can close automatically without somebody there. But we'll take all of those factors into account, and we can bring back something to the board to say, here's sort of our approach.
Thank you. And then I just had one more quick question, which was the park restroom project. I know it seems like it's been a while since we asked the city for a permit on those. Can you give us an update, Dr. Westover, on that process and where we are?
Sure. The city has actually recently approved the park restrooms. And I think we're at kind of the stage where the next step would be deciding to move forward or not.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, trustee Blakely.
Thank you. I was looking at the tree canopy and count slide for the Vargas tree installation, and it looks like that may have been the original. It was, well, I don't know what page it was of your presentation, but it's the one that shows the landscape design with the circles for trees. And it looks like the one that we had originally seen. And I thought that they were going to go back and look at that, because it still has a whole bunch of redwoods, like a lot of them, in the middle of the blacktop. And I'm just wondering whether, after going back and looking at that everybody still thought it was a good idea to put coastal redwoods in the middle of the blacktop.
I need to apologize. I was grabbing photos just to illustrate where we were in the Vargas process, and I think I grabbed the first set.
Oh, good. Good.
My
It looked
apologies.
familiar, so I'm just want to make sure. Thank you. I'm good. I'd love to see the new one, just out of curiosity, but I'm glad that it got updated.
Any other clarifying questions? Trustee Chang?
Thank you. A question about the window replacements. The past time that topic came to the board, there's a lot of discussion about like windows being a second exit or egress. The way those windows are designed, do they open wide enough for people to egress out?
So these windows were not designed for egress. They were designed for airflow. And most of it has to do with DSA requirements and what the opening mechanisms of the windows.
Oh, thank you. So it seemed like that. So I just following up with that extensive conversation we had at the last board meeting regarding that. I had a question, the parks toilet, when that, I know that was decided kind of before some of us came on the board. So could I get some context for how the parks toilet became a district investment versus a city investment?
So it is actually going to be a city investment. We've been talking about that, but we'll put in the money up front. So the way that this originally happened, this predates Dr. Westover, is that as part of the joint use agreement, there was a concern about the public being able to use the actual bathrooms on a particular site. And Castro was one of the main ones that came up, like after I was the one to do it. But there were also concerns about the public coming on the campus during the school day or after school programming and using the same restrooms that students were using. And so at that time, when we started working on the master's facility plan, we came back and voiced the concern and said, these bathrooms, which are really geared towards the public, really need to be removed from actually being a part of the school grounds. And then we talked with the city, and the city said, well, if that's going to be the case, because they didn't want to pay for any restrooms that they wouldn't be able to have accessible. So then they stated, similar to what we have over at Crittenden, as well as at Graham, that they would be amenable to putting restrooms at these sites so that public members could use them. But because we weren't sure whether or not, originally we thought it had to go through DSA. And because it had to go through DSA, our team was actually better equipped to take the process through DSA. And then going through DSA, we found out the DSA wouldn't approve them. It actually needs to go through the city, which is also part of the reason why it's taking us a little bit longer, because we had to get rejected from DSA and find out why, and then take it actually through the city. And so that's how we got here. But that's the origin of why we were sort of the owners of the project, even though we knew at some point we would turn it back over to the city and they would compensate us for the cost.
So the city at some point will compensate the construction of these restrooms.
Yes, we've made a request. Dr. Westover is talking with them, and now the conversation is, well, and so at one point it was sort of a joint sort of project, because the expectation is that kids were going to use it, but now that it is solely for the use of residents, it's now moved to we've asked the city to cover the costs, and Dr. Westover is working with John Marchand, the city parks rec director, to get the final cost out.
And this last question on MUR roll-up door at Vargas. Have the staff envisioned how they plan to use that roll-up door?
I would probably defer to Mr. Taylor, who we need to just co-host.
I'm assuming the design and layout was per staff request, right? Like where it is and how it is was based on staff needs?
It was part of the concern. So there were two concerns that were addressed there. The first one was just because of how compact the school was, that they were limited in sort of space. And then it also originated from COVID, that Vargas was one of the last schools to get the solar project in. And unlike the other schools where the solar array that's, serves as a shade structure is sort of further away, the Vargas one is right in the middle. And so the idea was, by adding the garage door, they would have the ability to go in and out and give it sort of a more open feel, and sort of extend the space for lunch and other activities. But in that, I would turn it over to Principal Taylor to talk about sort of what recommendations he may have gave to Mr. Young, who worked on the master's facility plan. We just simply took it as a wise sort of suggestion, because he's on the site and he sort of understands the context.
Yeah, so I think one of the concerns that came up was during the COVID times having a ventilated space for students, because at that time students were eating in the classroom, and there was a huge concern for there, and eating outside wasn't an option, or wasn't a good option for students, with the heat that we get at Vargas. And so a kind of hybrid solution, and several trustees walked the campus with us to kind of get a real sense of what it was like on our campus. And so as we were walking through the idea, I think it was Trustee Berman and Conley and Blakely were all there. We were talking about what about a possibility of doing something that's similar to what is happening at Graham. We'd also talked about some of the kind of limitations, is that putting it on the other side doesn't work because that opens into a street. And so we put it on the side that's open onto campus. The way we use it, when we do have indoor recesses because of rain or whatever purpose, we're able to have students kind of free flow in and out of it, and provide a more open feel for it. We have our assemblies in the MUR now. So before we used to have them on the blacktop. We're now able to have our assemblies out or inside the MUR and it allows for all of our school to meet at once. We had a play last year in the MER. We had some plays in the MER. I assume, because we haven't had it since the doors have been implemented, that it would also create that sense of openness and allow for parents who want to be outside or kids who want to be outside to have that openness feel to it as well. So there's a few of the uses that we have and kind of how we came about with the idea.
Thank you, Principal Taylor.
Okay, wonderful. All right, so if there are no more clarifying questions, we will move on to public comment. If you are a member of the public and you'd like to make a comment on this item, you may raise your hand in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. Okay, seeing as there are none, some final comments from our trustees. I would just like to thank you for the presentation today. I've learned so much in this whole process of learning about all the work that we're doing with Measure T funds around how critical the healthy buildings are to student health and in a healthy environment. So I'm just really proud that we've been able to make the improvements that we have. And I just want to thank our community for allowing our district to bring our buildings up to, I think, the level that we expect our community schools to be at. So I'm just so thankful for that work, and excited about the work that's coming up. And if there's any of the Measure T funds left, I'm looking forward to having a conversation about what other projects we can dive into. Any other final comments? Vice President Huntley.
Thank you, President Berman. I agree. I'm excited to see all of this work rolling out. I appreciate the cost savings that we've experienced because our staff, led by the superintendent and our chief business officer, Dr. Westover, was able to so quickly pursue contracts and construction for these sites and really saved us money when the costs of construction are escalating so quickly and inflation and supply issues have had such a huge impact. When we first talked about things like window replacement, it was in the context of COVID, but what's interesting now is there's even more talk about how ventilation is still incredibly important, that it doesn't just help with COVID, it helps with other airborne viruses that students encounter. And one of the biggest issues we're seeing that impacts student learning currently is chronic absenteeism. COVID is still going around. It just whipped through my family last week, and my little one had to be out of school for a while, as well as quite a few of his classmates. And so ventilation is still something that's very important, and being able to provide it, I think is going to have, again, that long-term impact on maintaining a healthy space for students and trying to ensure that our students can attend as much school as possible.
Trustee Blakely, I saw your light up first.
Thanks. I completely concur with what both of you said. I was going to comment on the cost savings essentially by all the hard work from the district getting out and getting these projects underway as soon as Measure T passed. And I felt the slide that you showed with the unprecedented escalation. I mean, costs have gone up over 40% since Measure T passed. That is kind of amazing. I mean, talk about inflation. It was amazing to me. And so I'm really glad that we got a lot of that work done earlier before we hit that number. So thank you.
Trustee Chang.
Thank you. Recently we had those fires in Oregon, and we had days where the APR air was really high, air pollution was high, and we spent multi-million dollars on upgrading HVAC, which I'm really proud of. The thing I'm most excited about in our Measure T is our HVAC, which will help us for, I think, a lot of unfortunate, unexpected future climate issues. The HVAC we installed, I hope that we continue to train staff and faculty that the HVAC is most efficient when those windows are closed. Those HVAC systems, the way that it works, it actually strains the motor and reduces the lifespan of the HVAC machine, the airflow, because it has to work harder against open windows and doors. So I think that it's a $16 million plus Measure T investment in our HVAC system. I wanted to see it last decades and generations as it should. And now that we have these windows, there are situations where windows are useful, but we have to also work against our natural inclination, which is, oh, we want clean air, let's open our windows. Sometimes the cleanest air is our highly sophisticated filtration system that we just installed in every single school. And so, especially on fire days, I really hope teachers understand you got to close your windows, close your doors, and trust the system that is really best filtration, better than most people ever can conceive having at home. They're safer at school. And just the last part is I hope that I think the part toilet scene was a real sign of how we are working, how we can work with the city. It's like we did something, everyone benefits. It's nice to see on the heels of some more difficult conversations with the city. This is a sign of how things work. Thanks.
Trustee Blakely.
One more very brief comment. I overlooked saying, I'm really, 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 really excited about the teacher housing. That was a big slug of Measure T. I mean, all of it was important, but I'm super excited about that. Thank you.
Agree. I just want to just circle back. It's the safety task force. Dr. Rudolph, you said you would bring this to the safety task force around what the sort of the stopgap with the locks between the 10 to 12 weeks. I just want to make sure this is the direction that we're all good with. Yes, Trustee Chang.
Actually, I would oppose us spending $250,000 on a few extra weeks of, like, if there's a large cost to it. Like as Trustee Connolly said, we went for the history of the district not having the security measures without incident to buy a few weeks of comfort. That would be psychological comfort. I don't think it's be matched by the data, and I wouldn't support spending hundreds of thousands of dollars just for a stopgap. I wouldn't.
Will you keep
Yep, we're
Dr. Rudolph.
just going to bat it around and oh, it said, sorry, it said, please stand by. We're just going to bat it around and see what type of measures you get. I think the return on investments for 2 weeks for $150,000 is probably not the wisest. When it was 15,000, Dr. Westover said she misplaced the zero for a second. I was like, oh, 15,000, that's not much, but 150,000 is a completely different conversation. So I think what we will do is just have a discussion about what is feasible and what are the most likely options. And if it involves overtime, we'll bring that back. If it just involves locking the gates, we'll bring that back. But I wouldn't perceive it involving $150,000 for 2 weeks time. If it cut it down to it only took 2 weeks to complete, then I could see an argument for that. But moving from 12 to 10, I think it's a small return. And I see all y'all nodding, so I think we're all in agreement on that one.
Especially when 10 is just before the holiday break.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. And we will move on to enrollment and staffing update. Item B on review and discussion.
Thank you. Okay, I'm trying, here we go, to share my screen. Here we go. Thank you. All right. So I am really excited to be here this evening to share with you our update about enrollment and staffing this year all in one. Our information pertains to strategic plan goals 1 and 4, and also, of course, the board goal of placing all students in the neighborhood school. As we do every year when we discuss this topic, I remind everybody that our enrollment determines our staffing and our the number of teachers that we have. And, we need to look at those grade level ratios to determine how many teachers we need. And then to just remember that students don't come in perfect groups of 24 or 30. And so, we have to really be strategic as we are looking at our enrollment numbers and our staffing numbers every year. In addition to that, we have really taken some time to consider over the course of the year the concerns we heard last year about our 4th and 5th grade classes that had overloads. We started the year with at maximum capacity in classrooms, and then we had new students coming in. And, in the second bullet, we know that kids don't come only in August. They show up in December. They show up in April. They show up throughout the year. And so we have to be thoughtful about that and plan ahead for that too. We've also increased supports for our students at multiple sites due to data review and, the identified needs of kids. And we also know that our TK age continues to adjust every year and go back. And so tonight, I'm just going to share enrollment updates for you. I want to make you aware that we're doing this presentation a little bit earlier in the year this year. All of the data was collected as of September 11th of each year presented. Okay. And I'm actually not going to stop and talk about each one of these slides. This is the enrollment from the district and school by school. I know you've had a chance to look at that, so I'm just going to scroll through and let you take a super quick look, and then we're going to get back into the nitty-gritty of the presentation. That's okay. Keep on going through two more. And here we go. So as we discussed, our enrollment really determines our staffing. And if we look at the number of students from one year to the next, we've increased by 68 students over the course of the year, but we've increased our classroom teachers by 15. And this really is because we don't have exact numbers of students in every room, and because we've left room for what we expect and anticipate to be increases over the course of the year. We've also increased significantly the number of our teachers on special assignment. That's due to the literacy team and the newcomer teachers that we've included this year. Oh, and there we go. As we compare the number of students to the number of staff, it's also important that we include, some other information of comparison as well. And our ultimate goal is that our students and our staff really represent and reflect each other. And when we look at our students and staff who are in our Asian and other groups, we're fairly reasonably close, but we know that we have a lot of work to do when we're looking at that relationship and representation of our Hispanic and Latino students. I will say our numbers of teachers for this current year are still being collected. That will be represented in our next presentation. Okay. In addition to, looking at the students coming in and the types of, students that we have, it's really important for us to look at the reasons that students leave us. And so, we've had over the course of the years, a number of students leave, whether they were moving out of town, out of state, or out of country. And then the important piece too is to look at how many of our students are leaving our district to go to private school. And you can see over the course of the years, the number of students who've exited our district has decreased significantly. And in particular, the number of students leaving us to go to a private school has decreased quite a bit. It's not only important to look at our student reasons for leaving, but we need to look at our teachers too, and the number of teachers who leave us. I think right now, as we hear so much about teacher retention and teacher fatigue, I'm pretty pleased with the retention rate that we have. We've retained 87% of our teachers last year. And I want to make exceptional note of the retention rate of our brand new teachers, our temporary teachers and our probationary teachers. We've significantly increased that. And I'd like to thank our hiring team and recruiting team for really exceptional work, bringing on some outstanding, amazing new staff. Just like it's important for us to look at the reasons students leave, it's really important that we understand the reasons our teachers leave too. In reviewing exit surveys and information collected from our folks who leave us each year, we know that some of the most common reasons people leave are because they've reached the end of their temporary or probationary assignment. Some of them have accepted a job in another district nearby. Many have moved out of the area. And we have teachers who retire, and rightfully so. We're happy for them when they're able to do that. And then some of our teachers have selected to leave to be with family. We have some new parents who choose to stay home with their children, or some who just need to take care of their own physical or emotional health. Some additional data I'd like to share with you is just some update about the number of English learners that we have in our district and the number of our socioeconomically disadvantaged students. And you'll see, and we'll talk more about these numbers, but as we look at also our McKinney-Vento counts, our SED numbers looked like they were declining, but as we can see, the really intense needs of our students remains very high with our McKinney-Vento counts. We always talk about immunizations when we talk about enrollment. The law does require that students be immunized in order to attend school, with a few specific exceptions. I am really happy to say that as of September 11th, when we pulled all of this data, we had only 4 students who were still not able to attend school because they were lacking immunizations. And, I'd really like to thank the administrative services team and our district nurses and our tech department for really streamlining and creating new systems to help make sure that we could keep in touch with families and make sure that everybody was ready to go for school. And so now we move on a little bit to our hiring and our staffing. As we've reviewed all of this data and we've seen some of the the needs that we have and the information, we've added quite a few new staff, just support the needs of kids, anticipation of future enrollment and student needs. You noticed probably that there were additional English learners this year. And so, that the newcomer teachers become really important. We know that the gap between student and staff demographics remains high. But I do want to note that this year we really changed our recruiting strategies, and we went to several college campuses, particularly the job fairs at UOP and San Francisco State University, where they boast, the demographics and the diversity of their own students attending. We hosted our own job fairs at Stevenson this year too, and expanded our advertising through EdJoin. And we were really proactive in our outreach to applicants. So our applicants who were logging into the system were invited to come to all of these job fairs that we went to so that we could meet face to face. Our teacher retention rates have continued improving, and we really have updated our procedures with onboarding new teachers. We're looking forward to, seeing how that really plays out for our staff and making our teachers feel welcomed on school. On a more challenging note, I will say our special education positions continue to be the most challenging to fill. But we've been very fortunate this year with our exceptional new staff. And so, and just in summary, enrollment continues to be reasonably flat throughout the district. Therakoff, of course, has seen a decrease in TK due to the expansion of TK at other sites, but we do see that they have some increases in their neighborhood students. We have 4 other schools that have increased enrollment overall due to the TK classes coming onto their sites. Our withdrawal reasons remain fairly consistent. Our English learners have increased, but I want to remind you that EL numbers fluctuate throughout the year as we reclassify and also assess new students. And of course, our SED numbers have gone down, but our needs for our students remains really high consistently. And so moving forward from here, we will be continuing to plan for further TK expansion. Our age ranges go down again next year for TK. We'll be enrolling even more. We were going to continue making adjustments to our new enrollment process, which really had some great benefits this year. We'll continue tweaking those so that we can really streamline, support our families, support our staffing, support our budgeting and assignments. And then to help us get that 4 student number down even lower and get everybody in on day 1, we're going to be holding vaccination clinics in the spring and summer this year. We're aiming for April and July to hold vaccine clinics on campus so that our students who are enrolling have every opportunity to be ready to go and get all of their vaccines in. We are going to further expand our recruitment efforts through more colleges and universities and other outreach programs. And we are really looking at reviewing and analyzing staff survey results, not only from the exit surveys when people leave, but also when our teachers come in, so that we can really understand the needs of our teachers and make all of those important changes necessary to support everybody on our campus. Thank you. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Trustees, any clarifying questions? Trustee Ching.
Thank you for the presentation. On the staffing, you mentioned some universities where we attend job fairs and do coordination with. Does our district have like an ongoing relationship with our the Stanford Teacher Education Program, like the closest credential program to us?
We do work with having student teachers coming on board, but we are going to be looking very much more closely at expanding relationships with more universities.
Thank you. And then you mentioned rightly that, like, the cohort sizes and the number of teachers we staff, you can't always mathematically make classes perfectly sized. Are there any schools that have been at grade levels that kind of have some hot spots where we're kind of exceeding the class caps just because we can't quite design the numbers just don't work for the number of teachers and the cohort sizes? Are there any school sites that are areas of observation right now of like being over enrolled?
Most of our schools are exactly the opposite. Their class sizes are very, very small. We have had 2 classes elementary wise that were overloaded. They're not anymore because we were able to hire an additional teacher at Castro in the 4th and 5th grade. And Crittenden, I believe in their science department, is a little bit over by 1 or 2 students in a couple of classrooms, but that's it. We have really staffed and really tried to make sure that we have plenty of room for students and for continuing growth in our district this year.
A last question is just a question about the enrollment size at Stevenson. Is Stevenson as a choice school, is their enrollment set by policy or set by building cap? Or I'm just asking because like it's now the largest elementary school in our district, and it wasn't the case 6-7 years ago. So it's seen a lot of growth. So I'm wondering, like, is that by board decision that it grows? Is there a set number it can grow to as a choice program? I don't know who can answer that for me.
So a couple years ago, we actually, and this is before the boundary changes were enacted, we used Stevenson and Mistral and added an additional class to actually relieve overcrowding at other schools to allow for the neighborhood students to come in. We haven't done that since. We talked to the board about that this would be, this was sort of the request to use it as a relief valve. And then at that point, the board changed the boundaries, which actually brought, we had some schools that had 100+ students that were not assigned to their schools. And the boundary sort of brought the schools back down. So to answer your question, yes, that has been done. If the board wants to expand enrollment, you can, but it is limited by the size of the school. At that time, we only built it similar to Vargas to house 450 students. We didn't build it for extra capacity. And I think that was the intent, was that both it and Mistral would always sort of hang in that realm and never go any larger. But it is possible to possibly add 1 additional class if that's what the board wishes.
450 is the cap. It's at its cap right now.
Yes, it stands, and it's used to its maximum capacity unless you start removing other ancillary programs from it.
Other clarifying questions? No, we'll move on to public comments. If you are a member of the public and would like to comment on this item, you may raise your hand on Zoom. Okay, seeing as there are none, any final comments from trustees? Yes, Vice President Conley.
Thank you, President Berman, and thank you for the presentation, Ms. Vicure. It's always useful to get this update. I think one of the things that is very concerning to me is our continued growth in our McKinney-Vento students. Since pre-COVID, since the 2021 school year, we've seen a 72% increase in our McKinney-Vento count, which is gigantic. It went from 144 to now 248. That means that at Castro, 20% of the students are unhoused, and about 5% of our students overall in our school district. So the more that we can do to support those students and their families, we also know, post-COVID, there are many families who are kind of hanging in there and doing okay, who might not be McKinney-Vento qualifying yet, but are much closer to that edge than they ever have been. So even though our free and reduced price lunch count, or our SED count, has gone down to 27% overall district-wide, I worry that our students who are living in poverty are more impoverished than they have been in the past even. So whatever we can do to better support our families and students who are socioeconomically disadvantaged, I think it's incredibly important that we do.
Trustee Chang.
Thank you. I appreciate the comment of Trustee Connolly about the number of students who are unhoused and growing in our district. I think looking at those numbers is also worth us just paying attention to that. Our two school sites that don't have, that statistically don't have enough unhoused students to be measured is Imai Elementary and Stevenson, right? So our two schools that, so there's an uneven distribution of students who are vulnerable across the district. Some having 1 in 5, as in the case of Castro, and some having so few that they aren't even on the chart. Related to that is, I think it's worth us paying attention to this, that it is noticeable change from when Trustee Lambert and I were on the board. Choice schools were not the largest elementary schools in our district. And now by a healthy margin, Stevenson is our largest elementary school. And I think that I'm a major advocate for the programs at Stevenson, their parent participation and project-based learning. Those are things that schools like Monteloma used to be a pioneer of. And, pioneer, Monteloma being our smallest elementary school, right? So like, I think that there's a sign that perhaps we should really look deeply at, are there things going on at Stevenson from a parent demand perspective that we should look at the schools where we have less enrollment? Are there programmatic changes that need to be made so that, in many ways, in the case of Monteloma, bringing back project-based learning, bringing back deeper parent participation, because I think there is some unintended consequences when choice schools are your largest school in your district. So when your largest school is a program, it's kind of like the impact of charter schools, right? Charter schools have a question because you pull families who are have the ability and wherewithal to opt out of the local school. That's why this board so actively opposed Bola's charter school, right? So choice schools have that same impact, right? So I think that if we can look at that in the future, just something to pay attention to. Not just in Stevenson, I think they have a great program and I understand why parents want to go there, but I think that we should look at its impact as a policy on the district.
My final comments are, well, thank you for the presentation. It's always really interesting to see how our district changes over time. I had similar notes about our McKinney-Vento students and our socioeconomically disadvantaged students and sort of the way they're disproportionately represented at a couple of schools. So which further demonstrates to me, we recently had a conversation around board goals that I think that focus on how we're supporting our community at Castro, our teachers, our parents, our leaders at Castro, I think is a really important focus for us. So I'm going to look forward to more of those conversations happening in the future. Any other comments? And I'm really excited about the teacher retention for our new teachers. That was a really big jump. So kudos to our district for retaining our new teachers and seeing those retention rates in the 80s. I think that's really something to celebrate. Thank you. Okay, well, trustees, I'm looking at the time and we are moving along in our agenda, but we might need maybe an extra 30 minutes. And I'm wondering if we can have a motion. Yes. We can, with 20 minutes could be good. Yes, it is a little ironic. But to be safe, we can try to finish by 10, but I wonder if we want to make a motion.
In the spirit of the reason that this amendment was brought to us, I would
Yes.
rather be safe than sorry.
I move that we extend the meeting to 10:15.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, on a motion made by trustee Blakely and seconded by Vice President Conley, the board has approved unanimously to go until 10:15, gives us a few extra minutes. Okay, we'll move on to the next item. We have a board member request by trustee Lambert to amend board bylaw 9323, meeting conduct. And trustee Lambert, would you share this revision to this amendment, please?
I proposed making this amendment to the bylaws because I noticed that, sometimes we tended to sort of request an extension of time very early in a board meeting. And as a result, we sort of rush through a lot of important agenda items. And, I think that's not correct for us as a board. We should have as much time as we need to discuss the topics. And it really unfairly rushed the presenters, not only from the district, but guests coming in, making their presentations, and they worked hard to prepare the presentations and really deserve to be heard and have our comments. So this is very simple. I felt it was important to have us request an extension of time closer to 10 o'clock so that we had a better idea of how much extra time we would need to extend a board meeting so that everybody could be heard, or, if necessary, if it looked like we were going to go on very late, we could just postpone whatever was necessary. So this was just, I almost view this as a clarification and to help the board run more smoothly and the public.
Thank you. Trustees, I'll go to you for questions. Any clarifying questions? Then we'll move into discussion too. Yes.
I mean, I have no problem with trying this. Is it something that if it is approved tonight and then we find in practice that it's challenging, that the board would be open to possibly revising if we needed to, depending on how it goes? I mean, that's not a question for you, trustee Lambert, but
You said it one more.
if it doesn't go well, we can always revise it, yes?
So why wouldn't it go well?
I'm just,
It just seems very simple that we just postpone extending the time until after 9:30.
the second opportunity to postpone the time. My only concern is that we could end up saying we'll extend till 11 and then extending till 12:30 or something. And so that's where I'm willing to see how it goes, but with the option of possibly revising it if it becomes challenging.
Sure, really the objective of that is the saying is, even if we decide to postpone a topic and there's a couple of subtopics left over, we may not give ourselves enough time. So I want to avoid rushing. I think that's the main objective, just any topic. And if it looks like we're rushing, then postpone.
I'm fine avoiding rushing, although there are some things that we have to statutorily complete at particular meetings, but those are relatively few, with the possible exception near the end of the year. But my concern is more the second one, to make it later. I don't do my best thinking late in the evening. So I'm fine. I kind of like the idea of waiting until 9:30 when we have a better sense, but I'm not as excited about doing a second extension. I would maybe wrap into that first one, extending, and or considering deferring consideration of an item, which we've done on the fly before, but we've had a couple of meetings that have gone to almost midnight and I'm toast. I'm not thinking very well. And so I'm reluctant.
And I'm very amenable to if it looks like it's going to go on too late or we've just had enough, we can adjourn the item to another board meeting.
Trustee Chang.
I had a bylaw question, and forgive my ignorance on this. Even without a change, isn't there a procedure on which we can suspend our rules? Because these are internal governing. These bylaws are like things we use to govern each other. Do we have because I know some parliamentary procedures have the things where a super majority can suspend a bylaw to extend a meeting beyond. Do we have something in our bylaws that allow us to actually go,
If we wanted to extend it a second time, once in a blue moon, is that what you're saying? That we would have the ability to?
Within our current rules, if we didn't change anything, do we have bylaws that allow, if there was something like that had to be decided tonight, but we had already done an extension, we're hitting that time, suspending our bylaws? I forget now. And if we don't have an answer to that, I couldn't think of it off the top of my head.
Yeah, I don't
We've
know.
never done that request. Do we want, given people are concerned about the second extension, do we want to make the second extension like a super majority, which then it would kind of have to be something that we think is so important that we think that late night's warranted?
You mean 4 of 5?
Yeah.
The supermajority? I guess I'd be open for that. I mean, I can always go home if I'm falling asleep. The rest of you can decide.
I feel like we're sort of getting into more of a discussion than clarifying questions. So let me just take a public comment and then we can come back and sort of wrap up what we want to do. If you are a member of the public and would like to comment on this draft amendment to the bylaw of the board, you may raise your hand at Zoom. Okay, seeing as there are no public comments, well, then we can have the discussion. My comments will be, I'm thankful that Trustee Lambert brought this up. It just made me sort of think about our agenda a little bit more deeply. And there's definitely times that we've gone on until 11:30, and I agree, I don't do my best thinking. And I think what concerns me too is that we have our whole staff that it's really incredible that we have our whole staff that joins us, but I really want to be mindful of that. So I think that we could do a better job of me as board president. We've had some longer conversations because they've had to happen, and then some of those have happened in closed session, and I can't imagine having rushed those or done it any other way. But I think that we could just also be more mindful of the organization of the agenda and do more study sessions and be more mindful of the time. I really appreciate the idea of not making the motion until after 9:30. And I think if we can look at our agenda, there's usually times for how long we estimate each item will take. And when I was looking at how long we've taken on all the items, it's been pretty spot on. So I think when we make that motion to extend the time, if we really look at sort of the time that we really think it's going to take and we set a realistic time, I think that we can make it. I think the part we always sort of cut short is the very end. So sometimes there's board members that want to share something that they've, conversations they've had or something they attended to, and that really gets lost. I feel like we finish our conversation, but it's the end that we really rush through. So those last 15 minutes. And I wonder if just that time extension is made with the idea that let's follow what the recommended time is and set an extension that is realistic, and maybe we don't have to stay till 10:45. Maybe it'll be earlier, but at least we've given that whole allotted time of what we think it'll take. Yes, trustee Lambert.
I just wanted to also say that I think, as we've, hit the, the deadline a few times, we've been a little bit more thoughtful since then about making a few items in report form as opposed to something that needed to be presented at the meeting. And so I think we should also, maybe that doesn't go into the bylaw, but be cognizant of certain things where it's really just more informational and we need the information, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a half an hour, agenda item.
Trustee Lambert.
Another comment too is that it really comes up to how you organize a board meeting. We really don't want to be in a position where we have topics come up late in the agenda item where the public is very interested and they want to speak. And, because we're sort of time constrained, we're getting tired. We'd like to give them 3 minutes to speak, then we cut them down to 1 minute. And I think we really want to avoid that because this is on these kind of topics, when the public comes out, stays late at night, participates in the board meeting, they really need to be fully heard. And have to cut people down to 1 minute. It's not good for us. It's not good for the community. So we want to be very, very open to that and encourage that as much as possible. That's especially one part of our business.
I agree. Okay, so
So for the bylaw, I mean, I'd feel comfortable just taking out the second shot and having it be after 9:30. But one of you suggested, what about if we make it a supermajority for the second shot? And I guess I could get on board with that if you feel strongly about needing the second shot.
Vice President Conley.
I'm amendable to that as well. So I might make a motion to approve the amendment with the amendment that
We have to bring it back, but if you, we
I'm
can
sorry.
update it.
Look at me. I'm
So
already.
we can agree on
Gotcha.
language and it'll be easier to update and approve for next time.
I would note that there's a typo too. There's a 10
Yes.
a.m. It's supposed to be 10
Just
p.m.
noticed that too. So we will, I think the language you want to use is making the motion to after 9:30. We'll wait until 9:30. And then if we have to extend a second time, it'll take a supermajority.
Yeah, being
Yes.
80%, being 4 or 5, right?
4 to 5. Does that, Trustee Chang, how do you feel about that?
Good.
Yes.
It's interesting. I'm noticing we actually we really don't know about a bylaw to suspend our bylaws and suspending our board governing bylaws. Is that we don't have that in our bylaws. The high school district does, and a few other boards do have some have 2/3, some have a majority in a certain circumstance as a board to suspend for a reason. It's not in ours. That's why we don't see it. So
Interesting. Okay. Well, thank you. Then we will bring this back to, we'll update the language, fix the typo, and then we'll bring it back for board approval next time.
So I just want to make sure I capture this correctly. The board, and I'm just going to read it just so to make sure. So the board believes that late night meetings deter public participation and affects the board's decision-making ability and can be a burden to staff. Regular board meetings shall be adjourned before 10 p.m. unless the first specific time determined by the majority of the board. And what you're changing here is that that determination for the first extension will take place between 9:30 and 10.
I think you just need to add super majority to the second to last sentence, second specific time approved by the
Okay.
super majority.
So on a
And then
motion by a
correct
board
the
member,
10
3
a.m. to-
minutes before the expiration of a specific time, the meeting may be extended to a second specific time approved by a supermajority of the board. That's only, so just adding super. Okay. All right.
In correcting the typo on the 10 a.m. to 10 p.m.
Correct.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay. Well,
And
we're gonna
and one
move right
other
along.
question, do you want to bring it back as amended and waive the next reading so that it just falls under consent?
Perfect. This works for me.
Okay.
Put it on the consent agenda for the next board meeting. Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so we will move on to item 11, board updates. Board members, are there any updates? Yes. Vice President Conley.
Chairman, I do have board updates. The California School Board Association's Board of Directors meeting was this past weekend. Unfortunately, due to COVID, I was not able to attend, but I have updates from the meeting. Our very own trustee Chang has been appointed to CSBA's new Artificial Intelligence Task Force, which is looking at artificial intelligence statewide. And we're really excited the Mountain View is going to be represented there. And thank you for your service on that, Trustee Chang, for applying to step up and do that. We also, our county is undergoing what's called reapportionment. So California School Board Association divides delegate representation across its different regions based on the average daily attendance. And Santa Clara County has seen an attendance drop of over 37,000 students. As a result, we are losing 3 of our 12 delegates. One of them was an appointed delegate from San Jose Unified School District because they have more than 30,000 students. They no longer have that ADA. And so there's going to be a few changes that we'll see when we are voting in the future. It'll be a little bit smaller. There are new ethics training requirements that are coming out. They were part of AB 2158, which was signed into law back in September of 2022. But it requires school board members to take 2 hours of ethics training every 2 years as of January 1st, 2026. I know that seems a long way away. CSBA is already ramping up training that will be available virtually for winter and spring of 2024. I think as a best practice, it makes sense for us to go ahead and embark on that ethics training if board members are amenable to that. So I wanted to point out that that opportunity is coming up. The coast to coast trip that CSBA does also opens for registration on October 9th. A district can send as many as 3 people total, so it could be trustees plus staff to coast. It's a trip to DC to actually advocate at the federal level for the needs of our community. The California School Board Association left the National School Boards Association last year. We're no longer a member, and many other state level school board associations also left the National School Board Association. So now it's kind of incumbent upon us as a state to make sure that our needs are heard, as opposed to relying on a national organization to do so for us. I really encourage all the trustees to go. I don't know if other trustees are interested. It's the same week as spring break this year, so I realize that means our staff might not be available. Okay, I am very interested in going, but I would, love to have as many people from our, if we could get all, 3 people to go, that would be wonderful. And I think those are some of the highlights. I'm happy to, I'll share with the board the same information that I share with my delegates afterwards with more talking points from the directors meeting.
I'm gonna get the word wrong, but is the topic of what's the right word? Right now we run for the within the city of Mountain View, rather than
Districting?
Yeah, does that come up?
It's not, I would not say that it's a big issue at CSBA per se. It's something that, cities and districts have slowly been shifting over kind of year to year, usually in response to a threat of litigation, frankly. But it's not something that is kind of a hot pressing topic right now. There are a lot of resources though, when districts are going through that process on how to do it, because more and more districts have done so.
Okay, any other updates from the board? I'm just wondering if everyone gets the emails from Bonnie Mace from the Santa Clara County School Board Association. Okay, so I just, I will forward, there's the invite to the annual fall dinner at Mangiano's. So I will send that over to all the trustees again, if you want to, if you're interested in that. And then take a look at the presentation last week was on the science of reading, which I found really interesting as well. That was last week. So I'm happy to just put that back at the top of your inbox if you're interested in looking at those. All right. Okay, so any public comments on board updates? You can raise your hand in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. Okay, future board meeting dates. We have one more in October 19th, then a couple in November, and then December 2nd. It's going to go by very quickly. And at 10:01 p.m., we